Life always finds a way, even in the most inhospitable places on our planet. From the radioactively contaminated ruins of Chernobyl to the icy darkness of Antarctica, researchers have discovered incredible life forms. And believe me, some of these discoveries completely turn our understanding of life upside down. Be sure to stay tuned until the end, because today's podcast episode is going to be really wild. Welcome, everyone. Extremophiles, organisms that can survive under the most extreme conditions, show us time and again how adaptable life really is. Let's start our journey in a place where no one would expect to find life. Inside the damaged reactor at Chernobyl. It has now been more than 35 years since the reactor accident. That was 5 years before I was born. Write to me and let me know if any of you were already in the world at that time and may even have been aware of what was happening. In Ukraine, there were 2 explosions at the nuclear power plant which destroyed a reactor block. This in turn led to the release of radioactive material into the air, which spread across large parts of Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, and other parts of Europe. Over a period of 2 weeks, from April 27th to May 6, 1986, the radioactive clouds spread across Europe. The inhabitants of Chernobyl and the nearby town of Pripyat were evacuated, and the area was considered uninhabitable for decades. Before the war began in 2022, people were actually living there again, and there were regular tourist tours. I was in Kiev a few years ago and considered doing it, but then I thought I'd rather not risk my fertility being affected by radioactive radiation. I still have many little astro babies to father. Of course, at that time, the environment, flora, and fauna in the area around the nuclear power plant were also significantly affected by radioactive radiation. Over the years, radiation levels have decreased and nature has recovered, but the following discovery is still extremely astonishing. Researchers found a black fungus in the area that feeds on radioactive radiation. Its name is Cryptococcus neoformans, and it doesn't grow just anywhere in the forest, but precisely where the radiation is highest in the reactor block. This hungry organism not only defies the high radiation exposure, it thrives on it. NASA radiation researcher Kasturi Venkateswaran says the fungi collected in the reactor had more melanin than the fungi collected outside in the exclusion zone. It was found that they had grown in response to the radiation. So we are really talking about an absolutely extraordinary life form here. The fungus thrives on the remains of the reactor block. It can decompose radioactive material such as the hot graphite in the remains of the Chernobyl reactor. In the presence of radiation, the fungi grow faster, aligning themselves with the source of radiation in order to grow toward it, as if reaching for their food. It is incredibly fascinating that life thrives in the very place where such a disaster occurred. But how does the fungus do this? And could we perhaps even use it for medical treatment or even space travel? Yes, but first things first. The black fungi have a very high melanin content. This is the pigment in human skin that protects against ultraviolet radiation. The low melanin content is the reason why the paula among you look like tomatoes after a day at the beach. With their melanin, the fungi can convert gamma radiation into chemical energy for their growth. This may remind some of you of the plant photosynthesis process, and it is similar. Analogous to photosynthesis, this is called radiosynthesis. Now think about how ingeniously this fungus could be used for a wide variety of things. In principle, its radiosynthesis makes it a natural form of radiation protection. This is very practical for people who spend a lot of time in space, because cosmic radiation is radioactive and very dangerous to the human body in the long term. That is why the fungus has already been cultivated on the International Space Station, the ISS. The aim is to use its amazing properties for space travel. The experiments on the ISS are intended to show whether it is possible to protect spacecraft from penetrating radiation in this way. When humans eventually embark on missions deeper into space, for example to Mars in the next few years, they will have to withstand massive radiation exposure. And the Chernobyl fungus could be the perfect solution if, for example, it is cultivated in the outer walls of a spacecraft. It immediately occurred to me that this could be an interesting aspect in the search for extraterrestrial life. If such life forms can form on Earth, it means that even extremely radioactive exoplanets cannot be ruled out in terms of the existence of life forms. A planet completely covered with an alien fungal network, an absolute paradise for pizza fungi fans, but space travel is only one area of application. The black fungus could also be used in radiation therapy to protect patients from the negative effects of radiation. Or nuclear waste storage facilities could be surrounded by layers of this fungus. The possibilities are truly endless. In principle, the fungus could even be used to generate electricity. We could produce green electricity from radioactivity. There are many places on Earth that naturally have immense radioactivity. One example is the Iranian city of Ramsar. There are hot springs there that bring radium from the underground rock to the surface. The radioactivity there is 20 times the global average. Such places would therefore be ideal for mushroom power plants to convert this radioactivity into energy that we humans can then use. It's all still a long way off, but I find it fascinating to think about what this fungus could be used for. But nature has even more surprises in store for us. Now we're traveling onto Saxony in Germany, deep underground in an abandoned uranium mine where radiation levels are also extremely high. Researchers have made an incredible discovery. Germany used to be a uranium-producing country, but today Germany no longer mines uranium at all. What is going on there? In the Soviet era before 1990, uranium was actively mined at the Königstein mine in Saxony, Switzerland, and exported to the Soviet Union. However, the mine has been shut down since 1990. Since its closure, attempts have been made to clean up the mine water in such mines by removing the uranium from the contaminated water using filter systems. And of course, the uranium extracted from the water can then be sold on as a nice side effect. However, the amount of uranium in the mine water at the Königstein mine is now so small that nothing of significance can be extracted from it. The last load of uranium sludge, weighing 19.5 tons, was transported to the US in 2021. That could be the end of the story, but not so fast, because the Königstein mine still holds some radiant secrets, as researchers have discovered. Scientists wanted to find out what flora and fauna had formed down there. Such a flooded uranium mine is literally every biologist's wet dream. How does life fare in a wet underground biotope with high radioactivity? Pretty well, as we now know. The researchers found a veritable microbial party down there. Slime-like brown and white formations that looked like small stalactites grew in abundance on all the ceilings. On the walls, the researchers found orange-colored acidic microbes that looked like long, thin worms. The published research paper states that not only bacteria and archaea live in radioactively contaminated environments, but also species of eukaryotes, clearly indicating their potential influence on the carbon cycle in an environment affected by acidic mine water. In other words, life down there is very diverse. And the mine dwellers are, above all, astonishingly complex organisms. Most of them are not simple single-celled organisms, but multicellular eukaryotes, i.e. organisms with a cell nucleus that are capable of more complex things such as respiration and cell division. Incidentally, the largest of these microorganisms in the uranium mine was 50 micrometers wide and 200 micrometers long. That would be visible to the naked eye. This raises the question of how these organisms manage to thrive under such extreme conditions. The key lies in the low pH value, the high sulfate concentration, and the high concentration of heavy metals in the mine. I know that doesn't sound very pleasant, but for microorganisms it's like a five-star hotel. That's because many of the bacteria there are acid-loving. They gain energy by feeding on the abundant iron and sulfur reserves in the mine. It is precisely these acid connoisseurs that form the slimy stalactite structure found on the ceiling of the mine. Eukaryotes feed on these acid-loving bacteria, and even larger multicellular organisms in turn feed on the eukaryotes. This process continues, forming an extremely efficient and well-organized food chain system in the mine. The study states that eukaryotes colonize extreme habitats to a greater extent than previously thought and may play an essential role in the carbon cycle in the acidic mine water environment. A radioactive, flooded, abandoned mine is therefore a place where life can flourish wonderfully. This discovery is extremely exciting in terms of the search for extraterrestrial life. It shows that life is very resilient and can adapt to the most extreme conditions, and where are conditions often very extreme? That's right, outside Earth, everywhere in space. There are many places in our solar system alone that could potentially be habitats, but due to their seemingly hostile conditions, they were previously considered unlikely to harbor life. On Venus, for example, it rains acid. However, as we now know, an acidic environment is not inherently hostile to life. If life on Earth can thrive in environments that are literally corrosive from a human perspective, we must also include extreme places in our search for extraterrestrial life in the future. For example, exoplanets that are completely contaminated with radioactivity, or exoplanets with huge oceans of acid. Anything is conceivable. In fact, a new study suggests that even exoplanets far from their stars can harbor life in oceans if enough energy is generated by radioactive decay. The study states that the presence of a liquid solvent is widely considered an essential requirement for habitability. Our analysis suggests that super-Earths with radionuclide abundances more than 10 to the power of 3 times higher than on Earth can harbor long-lasting water oceans. So you see, discoveries such as those in the Königstein mine in Saxony therefore have super important implications for the search for aliens, a complete ecosystem in complete darkness surrounded by radioactivity. This brings us back to Ukraine, where researchers have made a discovery that left even experienced paleontologists speechless. In a quartz mine, they stumbled upon something that revolutionizes our understanding of early life. The researchers from the Technical University of Berlin, the Academy of Sciences of Ukraine, the Museum of Natural History in Berlin, and the Natural History Museum in Luxembourg had actually only intended to collect a few gemstones. They chose the Volyn quartz mine in Ukraine as their location. The mine contains a wealth of high-quality quartz deposits, and the researchers were primarily interested in the gemstones beryl and topaz, but then everything turned out quite differently. Instead of examining the minerals, they made a completely unexpected discovery: fossils. Let's first take a brief detour into paleontology so that we are all on the same page. Fossils are the remains or traces of living organisms from past geological eras that have been preserved in rocks, sediments, or other deposits. These remains of living organisms can take many different forms. For example, as trace fossils, i.e., the famous imprints of living creatures such as dinosaur footprints or animal tracks. And then there are body fossils, i.e., the physical remains of living creatures that are still contained in the rock. These include bones, teeth, or even entire insects encased in amber. These fossils are of great scientific importance because they offer exciting insights into the evolution of life on Earth. They enable researchers to study biodiversity, the development of organisms, environmental conditions, and even information about mass extinctions. And researchers have found fibrous fossils of the oldest microorganisms ever on the minerals from the Volyn mine, which are still preserved in three-dimensional structure. Until now, most evidence of prehistoric microorganisms has been detected using indirect methods such as characteristic imprints in rock layers. The fact that the microorganisms now found have been so well preserved is due to an extremely thin layer of aluminum silicate that enclosed the original form of the prehistoric creatures and then solidified, similar to the famous amber from Jurassic Park in which the mosquito is preserved. Professor Dr. Gerhard Franz from the Institute of Applied Geosciences of the Technical University of Berlin says that this is the first time that fossils of ancient microorganisms from the so-called boring billions era can be studied under a scanning electron microscope. This is by no means an exaggerated description of an extremely boring math class, but rather a term from geological history that refers to a long period of about 1 billion years in the Earth's geological past. The boring billions period spans from about 1.8 billion years ago to about 0.8 billion years ago, and no significant geological or biological events were recorded during this time. Nothing exciting happened. It was just a boring time, basically like math class. Unlike other geological epochs, which were marked by mass extinctions or the development of new life forms, there were no significant changes during the boring billions. This was a time before the diversity of life increased dramatically and complex organisms and multicellular animals were able to develop. It was only after this that evolution produced something like skeletons made of calcium carbonate or phosphate, and only then did coral shells and vertebrates emerge, which eventually produced the first true fossils with skeletons. All living creatures before this Precambrian revolution therefore had no real skeletons and could not be fossilized as we know fossils today. But Professor Franz was now able to uncover the secrets of evolution, and what he saw under the electron microscope leaves one truly speechless. He says that what we now see under the electron microscope are mostly fibrous structures, either thin filaments that branch out or thick filaments that have small protrusions or dents. He goes on to report that the findings are between 10 and 200 micrometers thick and up to several millimeters long, and some even have a thin channel in the middle. For comparison, an average human hair has a diameter of about 50 to 100 micrometers. He also says that they have found completely unknown forms of microorganisms that look shell-shaped or spherical or even have tentacle-like branches. I don't know about you, but to me it almost sounds as if the researchers have discovered some kind of alien life form, and since nothing like this has ever been found before, the question naturally arises, what could it have been? To everyone's surprise, Franz reports, by analyzing the carbon isotopes, we were able to prove that our findings must have been living organisms. He assumes that the fossilized organisms must have been a type of fungus, as the researchers were able to identify various substances using infrared spectroscopy and electron microscopy that indicate fungal life. These include chitosan and the elements bismuth and tellurium. However, Franz also says that this fungal assumption does not apply to all finds and that he can only assume that the other microorganisms could be single-celled or multicellular organisms, and that the fungi and other living organisms probably lived in a shared prehistoric ecosystem. In any case, the fact is that the microorganisms in the quartz mine have chosen a great place to live, because in such environments, these types of organisms are spared from sunlight and can live on substances such as phosphorus, phosphorus, nitrogen, or carbon dioxide, these substances dissolve from the surface and migrate further down through crevices, right to the doorstep of the microorganisms. It's like a prehistoric delivery service. The researchers are currently still in the very early stages, and we will have to wait for further analyses and possibly hope for new discoveries in order to learn more about these Methuselah organisms, which are completely unknown to us, and to gain new insights into the early development of life on Earth under extreme conditions. For us, this discovery does not mean an existential crisis, although I must say that I always find it amazing that we are living in the 21st century and still have not discovered and explained everything on Earth. This shows us once again how special our planet is and how life must have flourished here billions of years ago. Life not only finds ways to exist for extremely long periods of time, it also achieves the seemingly impossible in the coldest places on Earth. Let's now travel to the other end of the world, to Antarctica. Beneath kilometers thick layers of ice, researchers have discovered subglacial lakes that have been cut off from the outside world for millions of years. Antarctica is a continent because there is landmass hidden under the ice, in contrast to the Arctic in the northern hemisphere. People only really realized this in the 19th century. Before that, it was not really known that there was actually a gigantic landmass there. The ice that rests on this landmass, and for which the continent is ultimately known, is called the Antarctic ice sheet, or Antarctic inland ice. It covers an area of 12.3 million square kilometers, making it a truly gigantic ice desert, and 70% of the planet's total freshwater supply is stored there. However, the most fascinating places on the continent may not be at the top of the ice, but kilometers below it. There are so-called subglacial lakes in Antarctica. These are lakes located under a glacier, under an ice surface. The prerequisite for this qualification is that the lake is located kilometers below the ice, and in Antarctica there are at least 370 of these subglacial lakes that have been discovered so far. By far the largest of these mysterious lakes is Lake Vostok, named after the Russian Antarctic station Vostok, which lies 4 kilometers below the surface, with liquid water is 250 kilometers long and 50 kilometers wide. It's fair to say that this is the most mysterious and untouched lake on the entire planet. You may be wondering how there can be liquid water under this eternal ice. Surely it would freeze immediately. This is due to the high pressure. We are so deep beneath the ice layers that the pressure there is so high that the freezing point of water changes. Under such pressure conditions, water only freezes at minus 3.1 degrees Celsius, and the average temperature down there in Lake Vostok is only minus 3 degrees Celsius, which means that the water can remain liquid, but I still wouldn't go swimming there. It's certainly freezing cold. At some point, the researchers on site decided to drill into this underground lake. This was highly controversial because it was said that perhaps life could be found there, and if we drilled into it, we would contaminate everything, and then all future research results about this lake would no longer be relevant. Ultimately, however, it was decided that with our modern drilling methods, we could avoid contamination. In 2012, they succeeded. The Russians actually managed to drill into this lake at a depth of 3,700 meters, take a water sample, and send it to the lab. I think the results are really amazing. They found traces of life, and indeed of diverse life. They found genetic material from bacteria, fungi, and parasites. And parasites actually only thrive where there is multicellular life, such as worms or even fish. Despite the extreme conditions, the conditions down there are suitable for life, on the one hand because of the high pressure, as I already mentioned, which keeps the water liquid, and on the other hand because there seem to be tides down there, i.e. ebb and flow, due to the gravitational pull of the moon and the sun, which can still be felt even down there. These tidal effects provide the necessary currents that life needs. The future will show whether we can explore Lake Vostok even better and then perhaps study some of these unique species. But as I said, we must always be careful not to contaminate such an untouched place. What is also very, very exciting about these research results is that they tell us a lot about whether there could also be life on the icy moons of Jupiter and Saturn. In principle, Antarctica is really an extraterrestrial environment because we have very similar conditions on ice moons such as Europa and Enceladus. Icy temperatures on the surface, a kilometer-thick layer of ice, and as has been confirmed, a liquid ocean beneath the ice layer. The reason why water can be liquid on the icy moons, even though they are so far away from the sun, is the gravitational pull of Jupiter and Saturn. The resulting tidal forces keep the ice liquid, so we don't necessarily need proximity to a star like the sun for liquid water. The gravity of a large planet is sufficient. On moons like Europa, this even causes liquid water to spurt out of the surface in so-called cryovolcanoes. Mohit Malwani Deswani is a planetary scientist at NASA, and he says the following about the probability of life on Europa. Our simulation, combined with data from the Hubble Space Telescope that has detected chloride on Europa's surface, suggests that the water is also highly likely to be rich in chloride today. This means that the composition of Europa's ocean is similar to that of the oceans on Earth. We believe that this ocean could well be habitable for organisms. In fact, Europa is one of our best chances of finding life in our solar system. More detailed findings on this could come in the next few years. In 2024, NASA's Europa Clipper spacecraft will launch and orbit Europa 44 times, then prepare for a follow-up mission where a landing robot will even be lowered onto Europa. Perhaps that will be the moment when we discover extraterrestrial life in our solar system. I am extremely excited. To conclude our tour of the most extreme habitats on Earth, we now dive into the deepest depths of the oceans. With a maximum depth of almost 11,000 meters, the Mariana Trench is the deepest point in the world's oceans. The trench covers an immense area and was named after the Mariana Islands, which are located nearby. In the deepest regions of the trench, the pressure is about 1,000 times higher than at the surface, and temperatures can be close to freezing. In some places, the darkness is absolute, as sunlight never reaches these remote depths. And strangely enough, despite these conditions, the Mariana Trench is home to a multitude of bizarre life forms that feel right at home down there, and they probably think we are totally bizarre life forms in return, because we live 11,000 meters above the deepest point of the sea, and then also outside of the water. Down there, we encounter animals that have adapted to these inhospitable conditions in their own unique ways, starting with bizarre deep-sea fish that pierce the darkness with their luminous organs to microscopic creatures that live in the sediments on the sea floor. But how on earth can they survive there? For one thing, there is a lot of geothermal activity in the Mariana Trench. There are hydrothermal vents, also known as deep-sea volcanoes, where hot water and mineral fluids escape from the Earth's interior. These deep-sea volcanoes create unique chemical environments that are colonized by organisms that rely on chemosynthesis, a form of energy production that does not depend on sunlight. Incidentally, this also has super exciting implications for the search for extraterrestrial life. Even on planets whose stars do not provide enough energy for life, life forms could exist if there is geothermal activity. Another important aspect is the food chain. In the depths of the Mariana Trench, there are a variety of food sources, ranging from microscopic plankton organisms to larger predators. For the most part, food sources from higher layers of the oceans float down there. This abundance of food enables the existence of various life forms that obtain their food in different ways, and so it's no wonder that we keep finding new life forms in these incredible depths. On the one hand, the biodiversity is immensely high, but on the other hand, it's not easy for us to get there, so this area of the deep sea is still largely a mystery to us. And Chinese researchers have now made a rather spectacular discovery, a completely new virus found in the sedimentary layers of the Mariana Trench. The story of this discovery begins with a team of scientists from Ocean University of China in Qingdao. These marine virologists specialize in researching viruses and their interactions with organisms in various marine habitats. To isolate viruses at such extreme depths in the ocean, they used a special method called the induction method. This allows them to isolate bacteriophages, i.e. viruses that infect bacteria, from the sediments of the Mariana Trench. These sediments were previously collected using special underwater probes designed specifically for collecting sediment samples from great depths. And after thoroughly examining these sediments, it was clear that they had indeed found a novel virus. Hopefully, this won't lead to another lockdown. These bacteriophages were found in sediment samples from the trench at a depth of 8,900 meters. That's about 260 meters deeper than the previous record holder. This area is known as the Hadal Zone, named after Hades, the god of the underworld. Well, that's great. I'm thrilled. We're one step closer to lockdown again. They have christened the new virus with the easy-to-remember name VBHMEYH4907. If there really is a new global pandemic, we definitely need a better name. This virus infects bacteria from the Halomonas family, which is found in various extreme environments, including the Mariana Trench. The new study by Chinese researchers states that members of the Halomonas family are known for their ability to break down petroleum hydrocarbons, thrive in environments with high salt concentrations and alkaline pH values, and exhibit a high tolerance to pollution. These bacteria are perfectly adapted to life in the Mariana Trench, and the newly discovered viruses are perfectly adapted to the bacteria. Not only have we found a new type of virus, but this virus also belongs to a completely new viral family, which has been named Soviridae. The mere fact that we are still discovering completely new viral families shows how little we know about the depths of the Mariana Trench and the flora and fauna there. It's totally crazy. And this new virus appears to have some very special properties. Researchers say metagenomic studies show that viruses in the Hadal zone prefer a lysogenic viral approach to adapt to the Hadal environment, and our study also showed that temperate phages are more common in the Hadal zone, which could confirm speculation about a higher frequency of temperate phages in the Hadal environment. If you feel the same way I did when I first read this, then you're probably asking yourself an important question. Excuse me. Simply put, the viruses use the lysogenic approach as a special survival strategy down there. With this approach, the viruses infect a bacterial cell, but instead of destroying it immediately, they insert their own genetic material into the bacterium. The virus then becomes part of the bacterium, and the bacterial cell continues to live and divide. The alternative would be the lytic approach, in which viruses infect a bacterial cell, multiply within it, and destroy the bacterial cell. The somewhat more skillful and less destructive lysogenic approach seems to be the better strategy in the Mariana Trench. Okay, but now there's still one question left. Can these viruses be dangerous to us? The answer is most likely no. In the case of phages that infect bacteria, the danger to humans is generally low, since bacteriophages infect bacteria and not humans. On the contrary, such viruses could even help us. The team writes that currently, the isolation of bacteriophages and the enrichment of bacteriophage gene libraries are rather beneficial to human health. They help protect humans from bacterial infections, especially in today's era of antibiotic use and the spread of antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Bacteriophages can therefore be used in medicine to treat bacterial infections. So as you can see, this is a super exciting discovery that once again shows how many secrets still lie dormant in the deep sea. I hope you enjoyed these fascinating insights into the world of extremophiles as much as I did. From radioactive fungi to ancient microorganisms, life truly always finds a way. I will, of course, keep you up to date on all the latest discoveries from the world of biology and astrobiology here on this channel, so subscribe now if you haven't already. And speaking of extreme conditions, did you know that there is a gigantic volcanic area in Russia that wiped out almost all life on Earth millions of years ago? The Siberian Traps are one of the largest volcanic provinces in existence, and the eruptions there were so catastrophic that they caused one of the most devastating mass extinctions in Earth's history. To find out how this geological monster works and what danger it still poses today, be sure to click on the video in the top right corner. It's super exciting, and if you want cool space shirts or other galactic merch, check out my space shop. You'll find the link in the bottom left corner. Every order really supports my work. Otherwise, I'd say see you in the next video. Take care, folks.